All right, my friends, what's up? We're out here. We're going to talk about Islam today. So if you can hear me and you can see me, give me a word in the chat to describe how you're feeling right now. Any word, or an emoji if you're feeling like words are just like not cutting it. um, Currently, right now, I'm feeling incredibly stressed and anxious because I don't know. For me right now, I'm just on tomorrow's election, and I'm just really stressed and anxious about it. But that's how I'm feeling, and it seems like you guys are feeling stressed and apathetic. Happy because we have a test. Interesting. I wonder why you guys are feeling stressed. What is it that's stressing you guys out right now? Is it that you have a lot of work to do? Is it that you're feeling like just really, I don't know, stressed out about other things that are going on? Is it that so much homework? Yeah. All right. So totally understand the so much homework issue. I'm actually going to be doing a one day is free. Sweet. Okay, so I'm actually going to be doing a session this week, a bonus session. So a couple weeks ago, I did one on note taking, and I also sent out an ultimate guide on note taking. And a lot of you guys have been talking about just how stressed you are because of how much work you have and needing to study all this different stuff. And so I am going to do a bonus session this week on note taking and on how to study your notes because this is the time of year where I know things get more and more stressful, and a lot of what it takes to kind of stay on top of that stress is just sort of knowing how to organize your time and how to organize your thoughts and how to study those things. And so I want to help you guys do that. So we are talking about Islam today, and I know for many of you, you may have already covered Islam. That usually comes first in the post-classical era. I'm sort of out of order right now, and hopefully we'll get back on track. It's just been a little bit crazy. So in the poll, I just dropped a note of, what do you guys want next week? So basically every live session that we're going to do this semester is going to be free, as you can access that while we're live. Any of the replays, you've got to become a Fiveable member for, and that you can do by clicking the button that says access all replays here. I kept up the October pricing for now because, I don't know, I'm feeling generous. If you have any questions at all at any point tonight, drop them in the where it says ask a question. And every once in a while, go in there and upvote things so that you can, let me know which questions you really want me to answer. So, take a second right now, get yourself set up. I'm going to pull up my slides and we're going to talk about Islam tonight. So if you've already talked about it in your class, no worries. We're going to, it's useful for your review because this is a big part of the post-classical era and not something that's going to go away. You've got plenty of other times that in AP World that you're going to study about Islam. But in the polls, tell me what you want to learn about next week, what you want to cover next week so that you can make sure to, just sort of that I'm on track with what you need. So, all right, let me share my screen. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, let me just put this in present mode, presenter view. Okay, so again, post questions when you got them. Use the chat for you guys. You guys can talk to each other. You can talk to me. You can send me notes, whatever you got. I'm going to be kind of looking at slides. What I've been doing at this point in the school year is really using these Fiveable sessions to kind of give you sort of a sense of just like this overview, these like lecture-based sessions, because I feel like it's useful right now to just sort of like hit the topics and some of the content. Starting in the spring, we're definitely going to be doing a lot of practice prompts and questions and writing essays together. But I kind of want to wait a little bit until you have sort of done that a little bit in your class. So let me just ask a question right now from all of you that are here. Have you written a DBQ yet in your class? So if you've written a DBQ, tell me in the chat. I'm curious to see if you've done it already, if you've already covered it. So it looks like some of you a little bit, some of you not so much. That's okay if you haven't yet. It's one of those things that kind of gets unpacked slowly throughout the year because there's so many different moving parts. And so that's totally fair. Let's see, more SAQ. Yeah, that makes sense. So that makes sense. Most teachers start with sort of short answer questions, lead into long essay questions. Maybe hopefully you've done at least one essay at this point. And LEQs. So maybe you've done a comparison or a CCOT. And I did a little bit of stuff before, and we'll start doing some practice stuff, especially as we get closer to when you have finals and kind of the end of the semester, we'll start unpacking some of that. But ultimately, like, I want to kind of wait until you've touched on it a little bit in class so that we can be more of like a review for you rather than sort of starting from the beginning. Most of your midterms, finals, it's going to be most of it. So no worries. I'm going to help you do this. Okay. So again, hit up the questions. If you have any questions, post them in there and upvote each other's questions. We can also help each other out. So if someone's asking a question and you know the answer to it, go ahead and comment the answer. It's helpful for me. It's helpful for each other. It's helpful for you too. And then obviously use the chat, as needed, and let me know in the polls what you want next week. Yes, Steve, I'm going to definitely help you with the LEQ. That's, all the moving parts of this exam. In order for you to pass AP World, you have to have a good sense of history, of course. Like, there's a lot of content, but it's really a lot of skills. So I'm going to help you pass this exam by going over the LEQ, the short answer question, the multiple choice, the DBQ, all of that. And that's going to be a big part of what we do in the spring. And we're going to start kind of unpacking a lot of the essays in December, January. So I'm not gonna jump totally into it yet, but for now we're just gonna be kind of covering content. So let's talk about Islam. I'm gonna go through these slides. I'm gonna share the slides with you after the session. I'll email everyone the slides so that you have them. Let's see. Okay, so I definitely recommend taking notes, by the way. Obviously, it's not mandatory. I'm not going to collect your notes, but it's just useful for you to sort of have notes and stuff. So we're going to kind of go through. I am, by the way, using the AMSCO prep/textbook. This is essentially, what is it? Chapter 8 in AMSCO. And I know I'm a little bit out of order with things. So anyway, here we go. What you need to know about Islam. So at first, Islam comes about in the 600s, which would be the 7th century. Muhammad is the first one to preach Islam. And at first, it sort of spread slowly. But just in Muhammad's lifetime, it pretty much is spread across the Arabian Peninsula and a bit beyond that. Something that makes Islam different than Christianity or Judaism, mostly Christianity. Unlike Jesus, Muhammad is not seen as divine. He's seen as someone who is preaching the word of God, but he himself is not divine, whereas Christians would consider Jesus to be divine. So right after Islam came about, within Mecca, which is where Muhammad was from, the leaders of Mecca were very much sort of threatened by the spread of Islam. And so they began to persecute the early Muslims, who then fled to Medina. So this is sort of just the very, very beginning of stuff. And so we kind of move forward. So why does Islam spread? I mean, relatively, it spreads very fast and over a large portion of land. It's a widespread religion. So in that beginning time, why does it spread so much? And by the way, if you ever get a cause and effect question, LEQ, SAQ, anything like that, this is your cause, right? Why does it spread? So there's a couple things that are happening. At this time, there's massive drought going on in the Middle East, right? In that Saudi Arabia region where this originates. Because you have drought, you have migrations. Every time people move, they bring with them their ideas. You don't move anywhere without your ideas. And so because you have a movement of people, you have a spread of ideas. And so Islam itself will spread as people are migrating to find better conditions where where's water. So that's one reason. Second reason is that there's this inherent, within the faith of Islam, there is a desire to like expand trade. Trade is very powerful because Muhammad himself was a merchant. And so whenever you're talking about anything in the post-classical era, why does Islam spread? Why is trade so powerful in this era? You know, Islam is such a big reason for it because merchants are so highly like, you know, thought. And so as people are moving outward and trying to expand these trade routes, they are also bringing with them Islam. And, you know, introducing it to others. A third reason would be the expansion through military conquest. So as the Islamic empires are spreading and they're going to conquer a lot of land within the Middle East, within North Africa, all the way to Spain, all the way to India. And although there isn't like a forced conversion. It's not that Islam spreads through conquest and then people are forced to be Muslim. It's that as all this land is being conquered, what they do is they have this tax. And so essentially you can live in the Islamic Empire as a Christian, as a Jew, as any other, you know, religion, Zoroastrianism, anything like that. But you're taxed. So there's sort of this like non-Muslim tax. So it's pretty tolerant, you know, like considering, especially at a time in history when there's plenty of empires that are not tolerant, that are, you know, they force people to be that religion. In this sense, it's this expansion. There is an incentive to convert, but ultimately people will convert because the ideas are spreading, right? People are talking to each other. And so the taxation incentive is definitely a big part of it. But plenty of, you know, people remained Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, you know, different other religions. So this is sort of why. Why does Islam spread? These are like three main reasons. Okay. All right. So I'm kind of throwing up a lot on this slide, but one of the questions that were asked is basically, can you explain? Oh, let's see. I should have just hit that start answering. Boom, boom, boom. Can we do practice LQs next week? Here we go. Okay. Can you explain the Islamic beliefs briefly? Yes. So here's this slide. This is going to explain exactly what you need to know about Islam. So essentially, Islam is a monotheistic religion. I don't know if you can pause. Someone just asked if you can pause. I think you might be able to. Anyways, Islam is a monotheistic religion. You have 5 pillars of beliefs that pretty much drive the practice of Islam. And so these are the 5 pillars, which, by the way, for the AP World exam, you do not need to know what these 5 pillars are. They're never going to ask you that. However, it's really useful to just understand the basics of all of these major world religions because they're such a big part of everything that happens in history. So the 5 pillars are that monotheism, believing in one God, which in Arabic is Allah, praying 5 times daily, giving charity or alms to the poor, fasting during the month of Ramadan, and then making a pilgrimage to Mecca at some point in your lifetime. So those are your 5 pillars. And then there's this other like belief systems within Islam. So Sharia law are the like behavioral requirements for daily life. So every religion has these kinds of things, right? These are sort of the like guidelines to live by. And so this is basically like the different requirements in order to live morally, to live honestly, you know, things like banning of gambling, eating pork, and drinking alcohol, and cautions against like enslaving Muslims. Like Muslims practice slavery, but they don't enslave other Muslims. So these are sort of your like basic guidelines, right? Every religion has these. So in like Judaism, you have, you know, being kosher. In Christianity, you have, you know, giving of charity, all different types of other like guidelines. So Sharia law, that's what that is. So this is basically the basics of Islam. All right, let me click done answering. Okay. All right, so the Muslim faith is going to split, right? So after Muhammad's death, it will split between the Sunnis and the Shia. So if anyone, by the way, if you have an easy way to remember the difference, put it in the chat, because this is a good thing to know. As you know, even in modern day, the conflict between Shia and Sunni Muslims is a big part of current events. So if you have a way that you remember the two, drop it in the chat. So, okay, so you've got, after Muhammad's death, there's the split essentially happens with who the next leader should be, whether or not that person should have a relation to Muhammad or not. So you've got some are supporting his father-in-law, Abu Bakr. Some are advocating that his son-in-law is the next leader. That would be Ali. So Abu Bakr is the one that wins. He becomes the next leader. Ali does eventually become the next leader. He's like 3 leaders after that. And this is sort of like a quick succession after the fact. And so those that supported Abu Bakr are the Sunni Muslims. And today, about 85 to 90% of all Muslims in the world are Sunni Muslims. Those that supported Ali are Shia Muslims. That's about 10 to 15% of all Muslims. However, in Iran and Iraq, that's mostly Shia. So although the Shiite population in the world is a minority within the Muslim community, in Iran and Iraq, it is a majority. So this is where it gets, you know, it's complicated, right? So you have, this is where anytime when like religions, when belief systems are splitting in their ideologies, this is where you get conflict, right? There's a difference in, even though they are coming from the same, you know, background, all what I told you before with the 5 pillars and everything is true for both. There's a difference. And so this is where you get conflict. Okay, so what we have. Okay, so this is an important piece of the story. So we're going to kind of get into, you know, let's look at a map, and then we're also going to look at, actually this map was perfect. I didn't even realize this was actually a really useful map. So although the spread of Islam and the very, very beginning of it, right, the first like 20, 25 years starts off slowly, after that, it really snowballs. It really happens very quickly, you know, in relatively. So, all right, so if we look at this map, you can see the like pink area is sort of that where Islam spread while Muhammad was still alive. So that's still a lot of territory, by the way, you know, when you like kind of think about this. But that's kind of where it existed. After Muhammad dies, then you have the first 4 caliphs that come after. Remember, caliph is another word for leader. So the first 4 are going to spread it into all of that like orange area. So that's another pretty rapid growth. And then after that would be the Umayyad Dynasty. So that would be all the purple. So you can see the Umayyad Dynasty expands like really fast. And we're going to talk about the Umayyads in a second. But essentially you have it's like one of the largest empires after Rome, right? Like after Rome, this is massive. Like this didn't exist for a couple hundred years. So the Umayyads go all the way from Spain to pretty much like Western India, right? All the way through. So you've got the Middle East, Northern Africa, all of that area. The Abbasids who come after, the amount of land that they cover contracts a bit, but they still have quite a big, you know, influence over all that region. So today, if you look at like where Islam is, like where are the biggest Muslim populations in the world, there is, you know, definitely a diaspora that happens because of trade. So Muslim merchants who are using the Silk Roads, using the Indian Ocean trade, you know, and then eventually will spread to the rest of the world, of course. So you have giant Muslim populations in like Indonesia, for example, in parts of Eastern Africa, in you know, Pakistan, and Pakistan's kind of like on this map, you know, India in that region. And so that all happens because of trade, because merchants are moving around and they don't always, you know, leave. They might go one place and stay. Okay. All right, so the Umayyad. So this is another map to show you like just how big the Umayyad dynasty was. And again, like relatively, they don't last for all that long. It's like, you know, a little less than 100 years. So it's like Muhammad dies, there are 4 caliphs that happen in kind of rapid succession, and then the Umayyads are able to sort of gain control. So their capital was in Damascus, which is in present-day Syria, and this is the largest territory since Rome, right? You know, after the fact, the Mongols are much more massive, but between then, this is the largest one. So I'm not going to go too much more into the Umayyads because, you know, I'm helping you guys with AP World, and you don't need to know every single detail about every single empire. You need to know what exists and when, you know, like relatively when, and sort of the like big things. Let's see. Okay, so one of the things that I will talk about later is the Muslim control of Spain, which is called the Al-Andalus. Their capital here was Cordoba, which today you can see a lot of remnants of that within, especially like architecture. So that's something I'll talk about later. But basically, like one of the biggest impacts of the Umayyad dynasty is the spread of Islam, right? Because they conquer all this territory, and just like we talked about before, they conquer all this territory. They don't force all these people to be Muslim, but you are taxed if you are not, or you have to pay this extra tax. And so, you know, people do convert. So that's one of the reasons why it spread so rapidly in this region. All right, so the Abbasids are definitely they're the ones you need to know a little bit more about. Okay, so in terms of AP World, this is the one, like look at how much longer they last, right? Yeah, the tax was it the jizya tax? Is that it? Something like that. I think that was it. Okay, so you have the Abbasid Dynasty. Both of these, the Umayyads and the Abbasids, are Sunni. So the Abbasids, so you can see sort of contract a little bit, right? So you don't necessarily have Spain in there, kind of moves back, and they'll basically, you know, eventually keep contracting until they don't really exist anymore. But their capital was in Baghdad, which is in present-day Iraq, and eventually it sort of starts to rival Constantinople. So just to like show you where these things are, Constantinople was here, right? So this would be like modern day Turkey, and it would be like right in the middle there. Baghdad, oh man, this is hard. Somewhere over here, somewhere like that. So Baghdad would have been really massive city in this time. So incredibly, like, you know, a center for like learning. Like the Muslims within the Abbasid dynasty, there are so many technological and medicinal and mathematical and astronomical innovations that they make. And so that's like one of the most important pieces of the Abbasid dynasty. So if you're talking in any question about the effects of the Abbasid dynasty, or I don't know, like the impact, like anything like that would be like they come up with a lot of stuff. So I can't think of too many off the top of my head, but that's like one of the most important things. So to sort of explain the fall of the Abbasids, that lasts like, you know, 100, 150 years, there's a bunch of like outside attacks that happen. So while the Umayyads fall because their leaders are relatively weak and corrupt by the end, and then the Abbasids are able to overtake them, the Abbasids fall mostly because of these outside invasions. So sort of these are 4 of the invasions in this order. And all of these groups, by the way, like there's other pieces within this time period that you'll have to learn about with them. So the Mamluks from Egypt, this is a group that were former military slaves, a Turkic group, right? And these are coming from Egypt, and they start to push back the Abbasids within around, from Egypt and out. The Seljuk Turks are coming from Central Asia, and they were sort of they were a threat to the Byzantines, and they kind of start to come in from Central Asia. Then you have, because the Seljuks are coming into Jerusalem, which is, where the Christians and the Jews identify as a holy land. Before the Seljuks come, the Christians and the Jews had access to Jerusalem. So it's not that just because the Muslims had control over them, they didn't necessarily, it was fine, right? And then the Seljuks come in and kind of block that. They limit the access to Jerusalem. And so the Christians coming from Europe, which we'll talk about more in a couple of weeks, are going to kind of organize these crusades to reopen access to Jerusalem. And then finally, then you have the Mongols and like whatever was left, which at that point wasn't a lot. This is where the Mongols are going to conquer the Abbasid dynasty. So ultimately that year of 1258, that is the fall of Baghdad. And so that's their capital. They're going to push the Turks out, and the Mongols will get as far as Egypt, and it's the Mamluks that end up stopping the Mongols from conquering all of Egypt. All right, let's check to see if you guys got what kind of questions we've got. All right, so can I describe the spread of Islam? Yep, so I did that earlier. I definitely should have clicked start answering if I had known this was there. But the spread of Islam would be for 3 reasons. Number 1, drought, and you have just migrations because of the climate. Number 2 would be trade, which Dylan comments in here. And number 3 would be conquest. Okay, so that would be why Islam spreads. Let's see. I heard the Crusaders barely affected the Islamic world. Yeah, I don't think it was that big. I mean, I think most of them were failed. I think one of them succeeded, but at that point, it was kind of, the Abbasid dynasty was already very much in decline and had already been kind of taken over by a lot of different people, including the Turks. So it doesn't really affect them all that much. Okay. All right, I'll come back. All right. Okay, so we've covered the two Islamic empires that you need to know in the post-classical era. So I know a lot of you guys are talking about the Ottomans, talking about the Safavids, the Mughals, but we're going to talk about them later. Okay, they really come up a whole lot more in the next unit, right? The next time period 4. So those are like gunpowder empires. So for now, we're really focused on these post-classical ones. So I told you we were going to come back and talk about Spain. The Islamic rule of Spain is called the Al-Andalus. And basically you have, the Umayyads push all the way to Spain, and it's the Battle of Tours in 732. So, okay, you don't really have to know dates for AP World. You could get a 5 on the exam and not know a single date in history, really. However, there are a lot of dates that are worth knowing. And I'm going to post something about this a little bit later, and you can even Google it of must-know dates. And Battle of Tours would be one of them. And the reason for that is because it's literally the end of the Islamic expansion, right? The Frankish forces, which again we'll talk about later, they are the ones that stop the push into Western Europe. So if that doesn't happen, if we play a little bit, like a history what if that doesn't happen, then the Muslims will push further into Europe, right? They'll push into modern day France and Germany, and who knows, right? And what power does Christianity have today if all of that happens? Who knows, right? So basically you have Western Europe remaining Christian because of the Battle of Tours, right? This is sort of stopping that expansion. But the Muslims rule Spain for nearly 7 centuries, and you can really see a lot of that today. This is an example. So Pictures of architecture are also really worth being able to identify. So in this situation, like this is in Spain, and this is very much like Muslim architecture, like influence. And so you can see this in Spain, all over Spain today. You can see the different colors, the patterns are all part of that influence. And so if you get, like some kind of multiple choice question that is showing you a picture of this, being able to recognize that will be super helpful, because you'll just know this is Spain. This is Spain, but this is Muslim influence within Spain. I'm not sure exactly where this picture is, but it's so pretty though. If you ever get a chance to go to Spain to see this kind of stuff, super awesome. Okay, so there's a lot of prosperity in Spain under Islamic rule. In general, there's toleration between Muslims and Christians. They get along, they're working together. There's still that tax, but you can stay Christian. There isn't that persecution. You have a large promotion of trade. So again, Islam, trade, like put those two things together, because they're always going to come up and they're always going to be connected. And so within Spain, you have a lot of trade happening with the Chinese, with Southeast Asia, with India. And in this time period, we talk about the junks and the dhows. These are ships. The dhows are sort of like long, thin hulls. They're good for carrying goods. They're not good for war, because they're kind of thin. And so, this is part of the like connection. This is the trade that's happening. And ultimately, the largest library in the entire world at this time was in Cordoba. So just like centers of learning, this is sort of the, what is it called? This is just like one of the most identifying factors of the Islamic world, is these centers of learning. So you guys are asking still about Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. This is in period 4. So they come after. So after the fall of the Abbasid, that's when we'll get into, which one is first? The Safavids? Oh, I forget. So we'll get into that in period 4. We're not going to talk about that tonight. Okay, so sorry if you got a test on that or something. That was what your test is on tomorrow. Apologies. I'm not going to be able to help you on that tonight. You can check out my YouTube channel. There's some videos on them there. Okay. All right. So 2 more things to talk about. I think just 3 more things. Okay. So first, we're just going to talk about like social and cultural life a little bit in the Islamic empires. So essentially, it's youtube.com/thinkfiveable. Okay, so what you have, we're talking about this like promotion of trade leads to these cosmopolitan cities. They're diverse, they're wealthy, they're doing really well. And ultimately, this idea of like, go find knowledge, right? Go in quest of knowledge. This is a very much I don't even know the words for it, like a trait of a belief set of within Islam, is like, go find the greatest amount of knowledge. And so one of the only reasons we have the like Greek classics, the works of Aristotle, in a lot of world history classes, they'll start the world history in like, Rome and Greece as like the foundation of democracy. And then they'll jump all the way to the Enlightenment, which is the worst, right? Because you're skipping so much history. But one of the things that's even like the most frustrating is the only reason we have any of those works, those Greek works, that it's true, a lot of what we do today is very much influenced by them, is based on that, right? Our government, our institutions, our systems are very much based on that. The only reason we have it is because the Islamic scholars translated them and preserved them. And so it's frustrating that modern world history textbooks or classes just totally skip that and don't give any credit to the Islamic scholars. So much of, math, algebra literally, like that word itself comes from Arabic. Algebra is something that was developed by the Abbasids. The number 0, I think, maybe that was before. All these different, like, although papermaking was not developed by the Abbasids, it was like made even better. You have medicine that is made better, all the stuff that they come up with. And so really in a lot of the like cultural life within the Islamic world, it's very like high culture, it's high society. It's like, you know, people who are studying and constantly improving. The social life is kind of interesting. You don't before have this like elite merchant class. After, you know, within the Abbasid dynasty, and then after that you do. And remember, the role of merchants is like more prestigious than ever before because of Muhammad, because Muhammad was a merchant. So it makes sense that you would make your role prestigious. Within Islam, slavery is allowed, but you cannot enslave other Muslims. So they would enslave other people, right? Import slaves from Africa, from Russia, from Central Asia, from different places. It's not something that's hereditary. So it's not like if you were a slave, your children are automatically slaves, unlike chattel slavery in the Americas later on. You can get out of it. And a lot of the slaves will convert to Islam as well. So, you know, slavery exists throughout time. It's also not based on race. So just something to keep in mind. That's something that's pretty unique to the Americas in, you know, starting in the next time period in Unit 4. So that doesn't exist throughout the world. It's more based on your class and your like freedom, right? So if you're like a prisoner of war, you're going to be a slave, but not necessarily because you're any sort of race. Okay, women, Muslim women. So one of the things I talked about last week when we talked about post-classical Africa, Islam spreads throughout Africa, but in a lot of places in Africa, Muslim women do not necessarily veil themselves, right? They don't wear the hijab. And one of the reasons for that is because within the Middle East, some of the practice of veiling was a cultural custom before Muhammad. So it's not something that's rooted, you know, it will get developed further into the religion, into the culture of the religion, but it's more rooted in the cultural customs of the place. And so it's kind of an interesting point of just, you know, you have veiling of women that will be solidified under Islam, but exist before. But ultimately, Muslim women have a lot of rights in this time period that other women don't. And part of that is because of how Muhammad treated women. Women could study and they could read. They could not do so in the company of men not related to them, which is kind of crazy. But Muhammad himself really does raise the status of women. So dowries, that's a word that's worth knowing. It's when you like basically exchange something valuable for a wife, essentially. And usually that's paid to the father of your wife, like from the husband's family to the wife's family. But Muhammad paid his dowry to his future wife rather than the father-in-law. That's a big difference. He also forbid female infanticide. That's when you kill babies that are girls, right? So that is a practice that happens. And then also you have his first wife was educated, owned her own business. And so those are like major accomplishments for women in this time period. So at this point, women have a higher status than women within Christianity or Judaism. They were allowed to inherit property, and they could retain ownership after marriage. So if you own something, if you inherited some property from your father, then in other religions, when you got married, now that property belonged to your husband. With Muslim women, you still own that property. That's a big difference. If you were widowed, if your husband dies, you could remarry. You could also initiate the divorce. By the way, even in America, women being able to initiate a divorce wasn't true until like 30, 40 years ago. So it's like shocking. And they could practice birth control, which again wasn't true until 1965. So Muslim women had a lot of different rights. So if you're ever writing a comparison about women in this time period between Muslim women or sub-Saharan African women and other groups like Chinese women, or what else would you write? Probably would not like Mongol women. I don't know, maybe European women. Muslim women have a lot more rights. So that's something that you would talk about. Okay, last thing that will come up for Islam is Sufism. This is sort of this like mystical sect of Islam. You have the Sunnis, you have the Shia, that is Islam. Sufism sort of branches off from that. And so it's very much, it's different. It's based off of Islam, but it's very different. So whereas in Islam, there's this like quest for knowledge, in Sufism, it's more about like introspection in order to like understand things that reading a book I can't understand, right? It's like understanding myself, trying to connect with God, right? Unite with God in order to understand things about the universe that I can't read in a book. And it's not a very large population that practices Sufism. Okay. All right, I'm going to click out of this, and I will share the slides with you. I will send all of those to you. Okay, so, yeah, so I'm not going to talk about Ottomans and Safavids. So if you guys got questions, pop them in right now. I'm going to take some time and answer your questions. Try to keep it on topic, but if you've got a test or something coming up, I'll do what I can. If you also can upvote any of the other questions that exist, it's just useful. Okay. Similarities and different. All right, so yeah, I'm confused as to why some of you guys are so far ahead. It's kind of weird, but I don't know. Maybe you're just going further ahead. AMSCO chapter 9 and 10. What chapters are those? 9 is African trade. 10 is East Asia. So I'm probably not going to talk about those today. Africa, I talked about last week, specifically AMSCO chapter 9 and chapter 10. Looks like most of you guys want Asia next week. So chapter 10, I'll talk about next week. So let's see. Can we practice LEQs next week? Yeah, I think so. We're so far ahead because we aren't learning the lessons properly. That's not great. And yes, I can send out the slides after. All right, so it looks like, yeah, so some of these questions that are here, I'm not totally going to answer. Sorry. All right, so. Okay, so for those of you that are saying, I'm just curious, when you say we're so far ahead because we aren't learning the lessons properly, or we don't learn in class, like what do you do in class? What do you spend your time doing in class? Or what are you supposed to be doing in class? Just curious. Yes, we can do Asia next week. When is the next 5-able review session? So we're going to be doing AP World every Monday at 8 p.m. All right, so you can also, let me grab you this link. Bit.ly. All right, hang on one sec. AP World. Okay, this link will add onto your Google Calendar all of the 5-able AP World review sessions. And so I've added the links already for all of them for November, so you can add them to your calendar and make sure to come. They're only free live, so if you want the replays for all of them, we've got replays for everything now. You'll need to become a member, so that you can do by clicking access all replays here. The AMA, yeah, so yeah, Dylan, I added that on here. Let's see. Okay, let's see what you guys said. So you guys mostly do quizzes, quizzes, quizzes. You do a lot of quizzes, take notes on slides, practice LEQs and DBQs. That's good. When can we do the Mongols? We will definitely do the Mongols a little bit later. Yeah. So I would really recommend that you guys, I know it's hard. I know AP World feels like such a stress because there's so much content and a lot of what you're doing right now is sort of chugging through, right? It feels like this like marathon, and I totally get that. I would really recommend that you get a prep book and you get one soon so that you can really stick to what you actually need to know. Especially like, you know, the key concepts. So a couple of things I've sent out are the ultimate guide, and I should add those actually into the Fiveable platform. But the ultimate guides, and I'm going to add more blog posts on those. But just really sticking to like what really matters in the course is just like really important. Not getting bogged down with too many details, which I didn't do such a great job doing tonight because I gave you a bunch of details. But just kind of sticking to that bigger picture, like remember patterns, remember big ideas, focus on causes and effects. That's really the key. So, all right. So if you haven't already, answer the poll. So I have that. I'm pretty sure that I already have for next week to do post-classical Asia. I do. And we're not going to be live the week of Thanksgiving, but we are going to be live. I will do like how to study over break session on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, just to give you a sense of like what can you do over break to help you study. Depending on how many days you have off or whatnot. So that's something that I will do. Okay, so that's pretty much it for tonight. For all of you that are feeling stressed, that are feeling anxious, I know you guys had said, you know, not feeling super great earlier. You know, please make sure that you take care of yourself, practice self-care, you know, organize, stay on top of things, reach out, ask for help, and ultimately, you know, keep yourself strong so that you can keep studying and keep doing good. All right. All right, y'all. I'm out for tonight. So this replay will be available inside the Fiveable platform. No problem. You're welcome. And I'll see you guys on Thursday, actually. So on Thursday for, I think it's crowdcast.io/e/studying. I'm pretty sure that's it. Okay, so for every single one of you that's feeling stressed and feeling like, please, Amanda, help me. Like I'm so stressed out about school. You can join me on Thursday. That's the link. It will be free and you can join that. And I will help you to just like get a sense of how to study, how to take notes, and how to just get on top of this so that all of it feels less stressful. All right. Peace, y'all. I'm out.